I feel like we so rarely hear about solutions coming to the table, but the reality is solutions are all there. They're all out there. We just have to enable the right communities in the right way to get them. If we empower communities, they have far better solutions than we can ever come up with. You and your community matter, and they have value to the rest of the world. And once you believe that, you start to think, I can have a future because my ideas have meaning. We say music is the key, but it's really the starting point of a much larger social change that happens.
You said something around needing to stop sustaining problems and start solving them. What exactly do you mean by that, and why is it important?
We could...
Welcome to The Edge of Possible, the podcast dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cameron Atlas, and together, let's unlock your edge. We often think that if we just throw enough money or resources at a challenge, it'll go away. But what if the very way we try to help is actually keeping the problem alive? My guest today is Jake Groshong, the CEO at Playing for Change Foundation. Jake is leading a massive global movement that is flipping the script on how we create impact. Under his leadership, the foundation has grown well over 1,000%, now operating in over 130 locations across 30 countries. Jake and his team are using music as kind of like a Trojan horse to help dismantle barriers and tackle major issues like human trafficking, challenges in education, and turning refugee camps into self-sustaining economic hubs. In this conversation, we talk about the critical distinction between sustaining a problem and actually solving it. We explore why the answers we're looking for are rarely found by bringing in outside experts, but by empowering the wisdom that already exists within a community. You're going to hear incredible stories of transformation from the Sahara Desert in eastern Morocco to the villages of Nepal, and the specific mindsets required to unlock potential in even the most difficult of circumstances. This is a masterclass in leadership, empathy, and the power of belief. That's coming right up here on The Edge of Possible. Jake, we spoke recently and you said something around needing to stop sustaining problems and start solving them. And so for those listening, what exactly do you mean by that, and why is it important?
Yeah, I think that when we look at helping people, we often look at the short-term solution, and it's natural. We all want to help someone in the moment. We want to give someone $1 if they're begging on the street. We want to really try to help people get out of their situation, but often our solutions are so short-sighted. We're not solving anything. We're often sustaining a problem. So I try to approach every situation more long-term in terms of, we could feed a person that's hungry, and we absolutely should feed a person that's hungry. But unless we figure out how we're going to feed them long term, we're not actually solving any problems. We're sustaining a problem, right? That person's still going to be hungry tomorrow. They're still going to be in the same position they were tomorrow. So how do we build solutions that allow for that person to have food long term, right? How do we get someone who's being trafficked out of this cycle of getting back into trafficking? How do we help the community that is, dying from desertification, give them solutions to solve a water crisis? Instead of giving them a one-time, hey, here's a handout that'll get you through this moment or this year even, how do we give them a long-term solution? So I really try to stay focused on solving problems and not those sort of one-time solutions, but long-term solutions.
As CEO at Playing for Change Foundation, how do you go about that?
Yeah, so the way we work at Playing for Change is we unite individual communities through their own culture to solve those problems. So every single program we have across 27 countries is different. And they're all really designed, built, and run by the individual community that they're in. We use the local culture and give access back to the youth to access their culture. And we then, once everyone is united around and has pride around who they are, and pride around their culture and wanting to see those changes and improvements, then we start to use the ideas of the community to implement those. And we support each community in different ways and make sure that those ideas come to fruition. So, if we're talking about food, I would highlight a place like Like our program in Bidi refugee settlement in Uganda, where you have 200,000 South Sudanese refugees who live there and have for a decade now. They have had massive food crisis issues ever since the camp opened. You had the World Food Program that was there supporting them. But again, when you have even an aid program that's providing meals, it's really important in the short term that happens. We don't want anyone starving, but if we don't start talking about long-term solutions, how are we going to have these people feed themselves? Then we have an untenable situation. Like, these people cannot have to rely on outside help that's going to disappear at some point, because it will. It always does. So there we bought, I think we started with 50 acres. We brought in professional farmers and taught all these people who used to be, lawyers and dry cleaners and other professionals how to be farmers. And they took to it like wildfire. And we bought another 100 acres, and the government gifted us another 100 acres because of the success of this program. And we're now at a point where we're in process here, and it's going to take many years, but we're going to have the first fully sustainable refugee camp in the world, where people are farming their own food, cooking what they farm. And it's so successful, they're already selling the overcrop to the local northern Ugandan community and have built a business around farming. On top of that, we have hundreds of different entrepreneurial efforts that have come out of this, where, we bought the first oil press in northern Uganda, and they're producing oil out of what they're making and selling that to the whole community and exporting it as well. You have things like plastic recycling that are happening. They're creating everything from sunscreen to bug spray out of the crops that they're growing, and a whole community of businesses has launched just because we gave the community an opportunity to fend for themselves. And that's all anybody ever wants in the end, is the ability to have pride in who they are and get to show that they are valuable. And that's what we do. We show people the strength of who they are and where they come from. And that leads to success on a scale that I think, most organizations would dream of.
How do you get them to believe in that value then? If others are not succeeding in that way, and you've been able to come in and have a model that has, on a scale that's pretty impressive, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. What is that first step? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I want to be clear. Like, we have the model, but we're not the ones that are in the community. It's the community themselves that have the strength here, right? We're just empowering these communities. We're identifying the local leaders that everyone should be looking up to, who can lead the charge locally around uniting everyone through who they are and where they come from, right? What we often forget, and globally, is the strength of our heritage and the strength and value that we gain from having self-confidence, right? It's hard for us to all relate to, but we see it all the time in areas that are devastated. You have these generations growing up where they see themselves as lesser than from the moment they're born, right? Because they have less. They have way less.
Yeah.
And it's really
lesser
hard.
Than who, exactly?
Well, than those that may grow up in what we consider a first world country, right?
Right. Yep.
You look at like all of the entertainment that comes out, all of the sports, all of those, all they see are people that have way more than they do, right? Anything that they can consume, they're seeing a world that they think they'll never have any opportunity to be a part of. So you're seeing yourself as lesser than, you're seeing where you come from as lesser than, and you're not seeing any ability to have a future that might have any meaning on that scale. So what we do is build that self-confidence and pride to a place where I can be a part of that greater vision. I can be a part of that education, professional success. I have the ability to come up with ideas that matter just like everyone else. And that's really the emphasis. We build from you and your community matter, and they have value to the rest of the world. And once you believe that, you start to think, I can have a future because my ideas have meaning. Whereas before, you have this concept of, I have no opportunity. Where I come from is a disaster. There's no expectation on me to ever be successful. So why do I try? And we're giving reason to try.
There's something really powerful in the belief of self, in the belief to be able to I think maybe not only belief in self, but belief in being able to create change in whatever way, shape, or form that is, whether it's your own situation or within a community or elsewhere. I think there's real power in that. And like I said, it sounds as it's not just you doing it. You're finding, from what I understand, finding those that can help to lead the charge, can lead this. Are you empowering them? Do they feel empowered already?
Oh,
And it's the rest of the community that don't. And like, what's the steps there?
Not necessarily. I think most of the leaders that we identify are people that have dreams for their community of what's possible. And we work with them to make those dreams happen, right? So they're not necessarily empowered yet, but we see them as the leaders of the future. And we have, a massive vetting process we go through on every person we work with. There's over 1,200 people globally that work with Playing for Change at this point. And we make sure that these are the people and that they have a track record of at least success on whatever scale makes sense for them, in their situation. But the reality is once they are empowered, they become local, regional, and national leaders, because with this platform, they find success incredibly fast and people notice and they want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And then, every location we work in is about adding more and more partners, right? We have no ego in this. We want as many organizations to join in on these endeavors as possible. So, we have over 250 global partner organizations, and each of them have different areas they work in with us around the globe.
Is music always a part of the solution?
Yeah, it always is. And dance generally is as well, honestly. Most programs also have dance programs. Because
dance as well, yeah.
Culturally, music and dance are universal languages, and everyone can understand them and everyone can understand the power of them. No matter where you go, great music and great dance have value. So when you're able to share that, it gives you value. So yeah, it's our starting point. We say music is the key, but it's really the starting point of a much larger social change that happens. We found there's nothing more powerful than music and dance and just the arts to give everyone a chance to level that playing field.
So talk us through a situation, a specific project maybe, and where that starting point is music.
Yeah.
What's the challenge? And I know there are just so many. We've had, a number of different conversations. It's incredibly impressive to see the growth and the transformation that's happening all in different locations around the world. Can you give an example of, okay, there's a specific challenge that you found out about. You wanted to be able to put a project there. You wanted to be able to help solve that specific challenge. What's the challenge? How did music form as that starting point? And then how did then that come to be a solution to the challenge that was happening, where it's not just, again, sustaining, but it became actually something that helps solve a specific challenge in an area?
Yeah. So honestly, I could talk about any of our locations. We have 137 locations around the world right now and growing. I could talk about any of them for hours. But the reality is, they all have different levels of success, but they're all extremely successful. And, when I think about change, it takes time, right? Well, there was a program we launched in Nepal. I'll highlight this program in Tintale, Nepal, which is a village in southeastern Nepal. It's near the India border. It's it's rough. There's not a lot of opportunity. We launched a program there 10 years ago when it's a very old way of thinking. Basically, girls, when they were menstruating, were locked in sheds, sometimes forgotten about and died.
Wow.
They married as young teens, massive issues around human trafficking. And most girls left school around 14, right? So we meet a leader there who's from the village and says, I need to figure out how to fix this. We have to give everyone an opportunity from our village, a way to succeed. And we started a music program that allowed girls to play, which was new. And, they have terrible issues there with the caste system. We let everyone play equally. That led to a dance program. Within 3 years, it went from a place where wives, when you're married, you generally leave your house for like an hour or two a week, to women in leadership positions in the village. where they had seen the power of just girls having access to their culture. And these women bound together and formed their own group. And they fought back against all the oppression they've been facing for centuries. And they called it the Mother Society, and they started touring around through our support, of course, throughout Nepal, teaching about the dangers of human trafficking and child marriage and period poverty and everything, girls' education, all of it. And they've become rock stars, in the region. I mean, these women have saved countless lives at this point. The school that we started there has nearly 1,000 students now. When it started, it was 30. It's the best school in Eastern Nepal, within a huge wait list, but also has set an example for other schools in the region of how to operate. Girls now go to school full time. In fact, I was there at a workshop where we brought thousands of reusable pads to the community, and taught everyone how to use them, including all the men and boys, which was a wild thing. You could not imagine 10 years ago. You have boys sitting in on a workshop on how to use a pad for menstruation. It's an incredible transformation. And on top of that, not only do you have girls now allowed to go to school when they are menstruating, which was completely outlawed before, but you see girls going all the way through graduation. We have changed the way people think about marriage and the ability of women and girls to educate and have lives of their own. So within 10 years, this has gone from, a bastion of old ways of thinking that were really disastrous for women and girls to an example for the whole region and the country on equal rights, equal power, and what culture can do to transform the old ways of thinking, to where, the last time I was there, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I had the male elders of the village coming up to me saying, in tears, saying, we can't thank you enough for this happening, because we were so wrong about what we were doing and how we were treating our women and our girls, and the amount of pain they felt over the way that things have been going for so many centuries is something they're reckoning with for the rest of their lives. But the reality is now they couldn't be more supportive of making sure that everyone has access to culture and education, and that there's a better way of doing things when we empower everyone in our communities and we educate. And that has translated across all of our programs globally.
Wow. How is it that you go from, I would say, by the sounds of it, embedded beliefs as to how things should be, or how things have been for maybe decades, maybe even up to centuries. In those initial stages, you mentioned that change takes time. So what are some of those things that happened early on that started to, I guess, crack open the beliefs that were there before and maybe see that there's a different way?
All our programs thrive because of the leaders who run them. And, in this case, we have a leader there, still runs to this day, named Shyam, who comes from the village, who, I remember him telling me in that first year, it was such a struggle to get parents to let girls, participate, even go to school. And he had to go door to door, really convincing them that it was a good thing. And I remember him telling me, he also is constantly breaking down the caste system, where he had over to his house with his parents there, members of, the untouchable caste, for dinner. And his parents were devastated, because for them, that was such a horrible thing to do. He had to really, work in the trenches to convince everyone one by one in this village, there's a better way of doing things. And music was something that really broke down all those barriers, because the one thing everyone can agree on, even when they may not want girls to participate, is the importance of their culture, right? And it's important that people know who they are and where they come from. And providing access to that is generally a good thing everywhere. So that was the first step, right? That's how we break down all these barriers is, hey, I know you're planning for your daughter to marry when she's 13, but have her learn her culture, right? Come to these classes. It opens up a conversation, a starting point of, okay, now you see talent, you see success, you see self-confidence, you see a new potential from everything you were thinking before. And that's where we can have a conversation about maybe there's a different way.
I mean, I know that there's countless projects that you've worked on. Give the listeners an idea of the scale as to what you're working on and what it's grown to over the past years, because it's been really amazing. We met probably about 10 years ago, I think it is now, somewhere around then. So like 8 to 10 years, I think it is. And just to witness the growth that has occurred over those years is, again, it's quite impressive and incredibly inspiring. And so, just to give listeners where you've come from to where it is now, and let's go from there.
Yeah. When I started Playing for Change, it was sort of a scraping by small organization, in the last 8 years now, it's become, this massive force for good. And it's because of those individuals on the ground. It's because of the ability to build coalitions, to not try to do everything on our own. It's because we're not in each of these communities as, Americans or Europeans or Australians coming in and saying, we have the answer, right? It's because every answer is coming from the community and being put into action by the community itself. So, we've grown by thousands of percentages at this point. It's become something that is more of a movement to me than even an NGO. It's a different way of operating and thinking, where we create long-term solutions and help communities rise up as a whole, not just in one way, but every part of what has been bringing communities to the brink of extinction in some way or another, we're fighting against. So that could be, desertification in eastern Morocco in the Sahara Desert for different oasis towns on the border there that we've had new technologies and been fighting that for years now. It could be favelas in Brazil. It could be, the slums in South Africa. It could be, Syrian refugees in the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan, in Ukraine too, where we have programs for kids in bomb shelters, when I was there last year. And it's just another example of, even in the most dire circumstances, the power of music to get kids forward and have an opportunity for a future is unparalleled. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to see that around the globe. And it's the privilege of my life to be able to share that. And try to get more people to understand that there's a better way than throwing money at a problem. There's a better way than walking into an area and saying, I have a solution. If we empower communities, they have far better solutions than we can ever come up with.
How did you get into this then? Like, have you always been interested on the impact side, and have you always been interested on the music side? Like, let's go back to an earlier Jake.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely grew up, as a musician, and went to school on an oboe scholarship of all things. But the power of music to me, since I, can remember my first memories, is something that has guided me in so many different ways. I still to this day produce musical theater around the world as well. I have shows in London and New York all the time because I still want a hand in that creative element of the arts. But
what's your involvement in that? Is that like on stage, or are you behind the stage?
As a producer. Yeah. My path really, like, before I worked Playing for Change, I ran a foundation for Josh Groban, who's a pretty well-known singer out of LA. And that became really, really successful, where, we're supporting, I think, 12 programs when I started. It was well over 100 by the time I left, to run Playing for Change. And we have in music, alongside the power of everything that it is, we have so many incredible artists with such large platforms. And one thing that I've been really lucky to do is connect a lot of those artists to doing good. And, at Playing for Change, we are partnered with a ton of different artists, like our programs in Colombia, our partner with Shakira and her foundation, our programs in Miami with DJ Khaled and his foundation. We just had Damon Albarn from the Gorillaz visit our program in Mali, where he built a well and recording studio for us in our program there. So when you're able to get your message out on that scale, big things happen. And Playing for Change really started with a music video. It's before my time, but they did this song around the world where the two co-founders went around and recorded all these street musicians and recorded Stand By Me. And it was one of the first viral videos of all time. And those videos are still being made today. And it's such an incredible calling card to be like, I can watch this video and travel around the world and understand how powerful music is, and how, the overlaying message here is we're all people. And as corny as that might sound, and I think it gets lost all the time, when I travel to all these places and meet people, we've developed a society where we somehow think like if they live somewhere else, they're like an alien to us, like they must have such a different life. And the reality is we're all people and we're all a product of our circumstances. I mean, most of the best people I know are people who grew up in harsh realities. And those people should be celebrated, not ostracized. And that's really what Playing for Change is about, is we're celebrating everyone's culture. It's not just because you come from a place you have value. It's that everyone has value because they come from a place.
What I love about the work that you're doing, the team is doing, your partners are doing, is that, like, I've heard music is a universal language, and I think most people have heard that. Like, this is a real world example of it in action, right? Of genuinely being a universal language that breaks down barriers, that breaks down walls, that breaks down communication barriers, and opens up the conversation for something to change, right?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is the so thing good. That I don't want to be telling people this. I don't want to be going around saying, hey, this is the key. We have the results to show it. We have the proof. We've done it. And I want those messages of these communities to get out there. It's not about Playing for Change. This is about, we have people not starving. We have, all these generations not joining gangs. We have, solutions to environmental disasters. Like, those are the things that need to get out there, right? I think we get really lost in ideas of we need to feed these people and we need to, eradicate this, but we have proven models that have actually done it, right? We've actually done it, and we've succeeded where we've solved problems. And I feel like we so rarely hear about solutions coming to the table, but the reality is solutions are all there. They're all out there. We just have to enable the right communities in the right way to get them. And then that change is there, and we can stop worrying about, I look at things all the time, like it'd be like a hot topic, but immigration disasters in the US, and how hard these migrant communities have affected things on all sides. And I've been to the places where they come from, and I don't know what people expect when they have kids who have no access to education, who live in a really dangerous area, who have no opportunities economically as they get older. What do we expect families to do? They're going to do everything they can to find a place where their kids might have any opportunity. And in reality, if we invested 1% of what we spend in keeping people out in the areas that these people come from, they wouldn't leave and there wouldn't be a problem. But instead, we're choosing to take this approach of, let's kick everyone out, let's jail them, let's really, hurt families as much as we can, when there's a much cheaper, much more humanitarian solution right in front of us, and we're choosing not to take it.
Like you mentioned, this isn't just a theoretical situation here. Like, you are producing the results over and over and over again, to the point where, like, the UN has noticed, correct? Like, what you've been able to achieve. Like, tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, well, I've been working with the UN for a lot of years now in different endeavors, and I think they would probably agree that they haven't had the results they would hope for around the world over the last 50 years. And we came up with a methodology that they have seen as, this is a way to do it. So, it's early days, but we are planning right now a massive art center, actually, as the initial phase of a recovery process for Gaza. And we've done our studies and analysis and put together proposals on exactly what it's going to look like. So we're deep in those conversations now, where debris removal is step one, and that looks like it's going to happen. But You're talking about a place where the amount of debris will take well over a decade to remove. And it's really hard to find the starting place of what to do for a community like that. And the UN has seen what we've done, and they want step one to be an art center. So we're in talks right now with UNDP on creating an art center as a place of refuge and safety, and building a generation of people that don't look at the problem as something that we solve with violence. So, we'd build alongside it a parallel program in Israel. Then they would be sister programs that would work together. But we're trying to find new solutions to old problems. And, that's certainly one where we see a way to create pathways toward, I don't like to say pathway to peace, but a pathway towards success. Whatever that's going to look like. We're getting that sort of recognition from these global organizations that, there's a different way.
What does that look like then when it comes to expanding out further? Because again, you've taken it from, since you've come on board, from something pretty small to something with grand results that you're generating and impact that you're generating, partnering with these all different places around the world. What does that look like in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? If you have the funding, if you have the people to be able to build that out, what does that look like?
Yeah, we've put together models of, if we had another $1 million a year, this is what we could do. If we had, 3 million, 5 million, we had 20 million, so that we're prepared, because we are at that inflection point right now where we know what we're doing. We have the model proven. We have, university studies out there in the field working with us, so that we have all the data showing, the before and after of our programs. But the reality is, because our model is built around hiring locally and collaboration with other organizations, the cost is exceedingly low for exceedingly high impact. So, you talk about something like, if we had another $5 million a year, yeah, we could do another, 100 programs a year. And that's, hundreds of thousands of people that would be effective, not millions by that. So it's a really scalable model and not difficult to grow with additional funds.
You said you got universities out and putting together the data. What are some of the data that's showing? Like, what's the impact that's been made? Let's give some examples specifically.
Yeah, I mean, we have a program we actually launched here in Santa Ana, California, for kids that are in active foster care. We have a program at a place called the Samueli Academy, which is a charter school that was designed around kids in active foster care and kids from the local community there in rough circumstances. And you're talking about a population of 800 kids going to this school, and a lot of them are in active foster care. And they don't have a home, and some of them do live on campus in on-campus housing, even though it's high school. When you look at the results of before our program, and that was launched a year ago, right, to now, you had kids go from, I don't want to go to school, to being straight A students. We literally have the data of the power of what this music program has done. We built a recording studio, and we built a music classroom and all the instruments and everything. But the transformation from before, where they had like a choir that happened sometimes and some really minimal music programming, to, hiring another teacher, offering a whole slate of music programming. You went from about 40 kids participating in music to half the school and growing, participating in music in 1 year. And I was just there last week, and the kids kept saying, this gives me a reason to succeed. This gives me a reason to care. And that's the data is showing, is you're going from kids not wanting to go to school to wanting to go to school. And you're going from kids thinking they don't have a future to thinking, whether it's music or engineering or whatever it is they go into, they have far more desire to build a future than they had before. And, I see that in the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, where you have the Lakota tribe and the population that has been decimated for, centuries now, where we build this this arts, we partnered with Art Space, who built this incredible art center in the middle of the reservation. And this is the poorest community in North America. You're talking about a place that's, the average salary is $8,000 a year. You have an 80% unemployment rate. You have a teen suicide rate off the charts, terrible drug addiction problems in the US. And most people don't even know it exists, but you have a population of about 100,000 people living on a reservation the size of Connecticut. It's here in the US. We have these problems. And what this center has done for youth is literally take them from, I want to kill myself to, I want to get back in the recording studio. And the level of expression and the ability to talk about your problems and all these things that they never felt before are leaning toward, I want to help. I want to solve these things. I want to get the community to a place where they don't have to go through what I went through, where everybody knows someone who's killed themselves because it's such a hard life. I talked about the study, what we're doing in Uganda, which they're studying right now, and seeing that when you have a crisis situation like a refugee crisis where people are fleeing and have nowhere to go, and the difference between a handout and giving people a solution they can work themselves is unbelievably impactful in terms of your mental health and the idea that you have value. If we can build recovery toward opportunity, then we have a way to avoid all of these massive humanitarian disasters. So I'm just trying to continually change the conversation from, okay, we always have to start with basic needs being met. Let's always do that. But then let's say, how can we get these people activated, right? How do we get it so they're not sitting here with nothing to do for decades? How do we get it to where they have the opportunity to show how powerful and intelligent, and that they have a message to share with the world in a positive way? Why are we not empowering people on that level instead of saying, these are numbers on a page? We have this amount of people. We got to have this amount of meals every day for the next 10 years. Like, that is not a sustainable model. So when we have communities of people who are desiring to work, that are desiring to show themselves and the strength that they and their people have to the world, we need to find ways not to stifle that, but to empower it.
Using those couple of examples in South Dakota, Santa Ana, is it that belief in self? Is it that I have value? How does that translate over from a music program or a dance program into the real world, if you will, where, some of these people might go into music and other areas, but it sounds like they're going into other areas, right? It's not just, absolutely. I'm going to start and go into the music industry. So how does it translate over? Is it simply once they feel that they have value, that then it starts opening up? How does it work?
I mean, it certainly helps, but the reality is it all leads to the desire for education, right?
Right.
The reality is that all of these programs lead toward kids wanting to learn. And it's because our programs are them learning in a fun environment where they have real mentors, right? People look up to. And you have all those mentors telling them, go to school, get a great education. This is your way out, right? So it's really giving kids a path from, this person is telling me, this person who actually I trust, who is giving me joy, is telling me this is what I need to do because it's what they did or it's what they wish they'd done. And I now am being held responsible by these mentors. I'm going to follow through because this is the only joy that I have in my life, and I'm going to make sure that it stays.
Really cool. How do people, let's say on the not-for-profit side, even those that are in business as well, especially on the not-for-profit side, those that are aiming to make impact in some way, shape or form, how should they be thinking about solving the problems?
Yeah, I think, the number one thing that so many people get stuck in is this idea that we need to do it on our own, right? Like, I'm going to solve this problem and I need to have the solution. I'm not going to reach out to people who have also been trying to solve the problem. Like this strange independence we feel and ownership we feel of, I have to do it. I have to be the one. When in reality, if we all come together and build these coalitions, we all have different levels of expertise we can bring to the table to actually solve these problems. Instead of, I don't want to build one school, we need to build 1,000 schools. So how do we do that? Well, there's no one person that can build 1,000 schools, but there are 1,000 organizations that can build 1,000 schools. So there's this weird mentality around we're all battling for some pool of dollars, right? So that's why we don't share. We don't work together. And I think that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we can develop projects together with multiple organizations, that's actually where larger funders will take notice and feel more confident in something happening and actually following through, because we all hold each other accountable. And that's what happens with us and all the organizations we partner with is everyone is held accountable by everyone else, because we all have boards, we all have donors, we all have people that we need to show we're following through for. But when we have the other organizations, we now have that pool grow exponentially. So we're held accountable by everybody. We have to make sure we do what we say we're going to do. And I think that with the nonprofit system the way it is, the more accountability you can have on actual program impact, building less overhead and empowering more people on the ground, this is how we've solved these problems. So that's really how I designed the foundation over the last 6-7 years is about low overhead, high spend on programmatic expansion on the ground, and as many partners as possible to share the burden, because nowadays we don't fund any new program more than, definitely not more than 50%. The rest is all partner funded, and most are less than that.
What are some of the other, I guess, success tips or insights that you've had, whether it comes to leadership, when it comes to business, when it comes to growing something of scale?
We're only as good as the people that we work with. And you can't do everything as a leader. You can't be involved in every conversation. So you need to make sure that the people around you are of a like mind, but you also have to trust them. And I think that's something where I see a lot of organizations fail because there's not a level of trust built from the beginning. My mentality is always, trust people until they fail. And if they fail, then they're out, and that's okay. But at least you didn't waste, your time overseeing someone where you're both losing time. So I really focus on hiring the best people possible because they make all of us look good. And that goes from, the teachers and the people that clean up our programs to, our board members. Like, every person involved in the organization needs to be a person of excellence. And if you're not, then you're not going to work here. But there's a reason that we have a 0% turnover rate, because we develop a culture of joy in what we do and independence. I don't tend to believe in sort of a 9-to-5 workday, because I don't think that's real. I don't think you can fit every job into 40 hours, but what you can do is, here's your tasks, get them done. And, some weeks it might take you 20 hours, some weeks it might take you 80, but the reality is we do the work, and we do it because these communities that we serve rely on us. They rely on us to succeed. And if we had to go away for any reason, it would be a total disaster. And we all feel that. We all feel that that need at all times to come through for those people relying on us.
Is that what drives you?
Yeah, I mean, yes, definitely that drives me. It definitely drives me every time I'm on the ground, every time I'm, talking to a program, and I'm on the ground quite a bit at all of our programs, getting to know these communities and what their needs are. But I'm also very much driven by my own kids, and seeing what they have, and what generally people have, across the majority of the US at least, access to education, access to job potential, and how taken for granted that is in a lot of ways. Whereas there is something to all these kids who have been through disasters or grown up in a disaster, the level of passion they have to succeed, if they've managed to find a way through, is unparalleled. I think when you've seen that, when you've experienced it, it changes you to a point where you need to succeed. And that's something where, I bring my kids to see these programs because I want them to understand how they have it and to not take it for granted. And I think if there's one thing I want to figure out more, it's how to get generations of youth in areas that are more affluent, how to get them to understand that they are lucky. They are lucky to have what they have and to not take it for granted. And I think the more that we can get past this idea that the people who live somewhere else are aliens to us, the more we can understand that, oh, this kid who's living in this slum is just like me. It's just we had different circumstances and different opportunity. The more we can do that, the more that I see it in my kids and I see it in others. They build that desire to succeed as well, right? They build that like, oh, I have it lucky. I can't take this for granted. I need to get my education. I need to succeed. So the more we can get people to understand that we're all human, and that's really what it comes down to. And the more we can level that playing field, the more we're going to create great people. And I think, that's something we can all agree on, is that we all want our next generations to be better than we are. We want them to succeed on levels far higher than we could. And when we use something like music, when you start to understand people's cultures and we start to appreciate them, it gives us that leg up to want to succeed. It shows us that we're all human. We all have different strengths, and I need to work. I need to work to get where I want to go.
What's really interesting as you were sharing that, I thought about, and I've shared this in many different talks and coaching engagements, is that on the power of contrasting experiences. And I often talk about it in a personal sense where, you experience one side of something and then you experience the exact opposite of that. And that contrasting experience is often what lights up and has you have a higher level of conviction about what it is that you do want and what you don't want to experience, as an example. And as you were sharing, I think there is real value in being able to experience contrasting experience, the power of contrasting experiences, because it enables you to see, what you have and what somebody else doesn't have, or vice versa, what you don't have and what somebody else does have. And if we can build that in a way where people feel empowered then to do something about it, that's a really good space to be.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I think one of the most damaging things that has happened in philanthropy is we show kids and communities suffering, right? We don't show them after the fact. And all we get is this constant stream of images of people suffering. And it creates this system of, I'm better than these people. And that's what we have to get past. This idea that I'm better because I got to grow up here. It doesn't make you a better person than them. It just means you have luckier circumstances. And for whatever reason, we've grown this mentality of, oh, that person grew up in a place without electricity, so they have no concept of the world, and I couldn't even have a conversation with them. It's so not true. They could be just as educated as you are. It's just that all we ever see of them are these, oh, this kid is starving, this kid doesn't have, clean water, or whatever it is. It doesn't make them less than. And if we can have those conversations, when you have those conversations, these kids are extraordinary, and when you see the level of musical and dance talent that comes out of our programs, like, it's way beyond anything that we have in the US in so many ways, but we just assume that they're less because they didn't have the same access that we had. So this is a way when they get to show the level of strength through their own culture to other communities, it's where we start to understand and appreciate, oh, maybe they're just as human as I am.
Two words that come to my mind when just you were sharing that last part is enabling potential. The potential is there. It's, someone hasn't been exposed to the same opportunities, same experiences to be able to utilize that potential to create something in the world. And I think that's at least for, as you were sharing, the way that I could position it in my mind of, enabling potential is, that's what you're in the business of at the end of the day.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But it's not just enabling, potential. It's getting these kids to believe that they have potential. Right?
That's good.
It's changing their mindset. It's not just about, we get to feel good because we're helping people. It's about the people that we're helping feeling good because they see that they actually have potential for the first time.
Definitely. And I would see that as if the person doesn't believe that they have the potential in the first place, then how can you possibly enable that in somebody?
You can't.
Right? There
That's right.
has to be that first step, first and foremost, of I have value, I have something to offer to the world, and then the opportunities to actually then pursue that. You know, there's those couple of steps have to be there, because otherwise, and I, when I look at it from a behavioral standpoint, is internal accountability versus external accountability. External accountability is like, I'll continue doing the thing as long as somebody else is there. The internal accountability is, I'm just going to continue doing this because I know this is who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And when we build that in, and when I go through this on the coaching side, with coaching clients, is I'm constantly working on building their own internal responsibility, their own internal ownership, their own internal accountability to themselves and to the work that they're doing, because then it doesn't matter what's happening outside. The external just becomes an added bonus, but the internal is the drive that's needed to ensure that somebody takes the action that's aligned to who they're aiming to become, even when nobody else is around.
I think you're so spot on in that these programs change the way kids think internally, right? And we see this all the time. We can put all the boundaries around kids and hope that they take it in, and they'll succeed because of the boundaries. A lot of areas we work in, we can't put up that thing. We can't demand that kids, go to school. We can't demand that their parents hold them accountable to do their homework. We can't do those sorts of things. What we can do, and a lot of them, when I talk about a place like Uganda and the South Sudanese refugees, 80% of that population is under 20. So you're talking about most of them don't have parents to hold them accountable.
Oh.
So the only way to solve these problems is to change that internal mindset, right? And that happens really through giving them someone to look up to that is like them, that is from their culture, that shows them that they have so much power and so much to give because of where they come from, not despite it.
How does somebody get involved? And I think maybe there's different ways that people can get involved in the work. If those listening, hey, this sounds, I really want to understand how I could potentially help in some way, shape or form. Is there volunteering? Is it funding? Like, what are the big things that are needed for the foundation right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're not a volunteer-driven organization, obviously, because of the way that we operate, right? Like, we have people volunteer at our programs, but the people that are volunteering are from the community, So if you're in the Santa Ana community, or you're in Pine Ridge, or, we have some programs in Miami, or if you're, throughout Africa, Asia, South America, like, we have programs, but you have to be in that community to volunteer there. I think one of the huge mistakes we've made generally in the population is this idea of travel philanthropy, where we need to go to a place and help get our hands dirty to feel it, to think we're doing some good, where we could use those same funds and invest that in the community and have the community do that building, or do that farming or whatever it is at a far lower cost, where it has a much higher impact and is more sustainable. And honestly done better because it's being done by the community. So we're actually sort of the opposite, where we don't want people to volunteer in our programs, because it would go against what we believe in, which is empowering communities themselves. But we do plenty of help externally for these communities, where we have tons of people throw events, celebrations. There definitely are opportunities to come see programs and visit them and experience it. But that's always going to be more of the community welcoming and celebrating their culture for you. The reality is, we're like every nonprofit in the world, where they're all struggling financially right now. It's a hard time to raise funds. So that's where the most help is always needed. We have a wait list of programs wanting to open that are just funding dependent. So the moment that we have that funding in the door, we'll open those. But we don't close programs. We really make sure that once we open, that program is sustained forever. The good thing about our model is, because each program breeds success quite quickly, funders tend to show up, and often it'll be in places like, when I was talking about Nepal, that community is now funded by the government because of the success that it had. You're talking about a government that doesn't fund those kind of projects. This was the first time it is that the region of Nepal had ever funded a women-led initiative. They built a building for the Mother Society in the village, funded entirely by the government. So it just goes to show, like, these changes can happen, but it just starts with this little spark of, hey, let's celebrate this culture and then show what our culture is capable of.
I love it. How do people, when it comes to funding or getting involved when it comes to throwing events or something like that, like what's the way that people do that?
Yeah, you can always email us, info@playingforchange.org. If we have large donors and things, that are interested, we'll put together a whole presentation for you on what that might look like, what your impact could be. The vast majority of our dollars vast majority go directly to programs on the ground. And we have a high level of donor impact. So we have, our donors are very much repeat donors year to year. But we need to expand because the opportunities just keep growing and growing. The world's a tough place right now, and we have a solution to make it a little less tougher. So, you can always reach out to me or anyone on the team. All the info is on our website at playingforchange.org. We're also on, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all that stuff where you can find us. But Playing for Change Foundation, that's all you need to Google or look up on any of those sites, and you'll find us.
And we'll make sure we're linked to everything for those listening. We'll make sure those are all linked in the show notes as well. Hey, we have a rapid fire segment on the show called Your Edge. We walk through your values, beliefs, and habits. What is your number one value and why?
I guess, I hate to say it, but it's the golden rule, right? Like, treat others how you want to be treated. Like that.
Yeah.
I know that's like, without any religious connotation or anything, that's certainly not who I am, but I really try to put myself in other people's shoes all the time, whoever I'm talking to understand that context of how are they seeing me? How are they seeing the way that I'm talking, responding to a situation? And I'm always making sure to listen, because I always want to be listened to. We all want to be listened to. So I really work hard to make sure that I'm taking in what someone is saying and responding in kind and making sure that whatever approach I have, even if I say no in the end, that I have given them the respect to understand that I hear them.
And what about a core belief then that's really shaped who you become? And it might be a flow on from what you just shared there, but it could be about yourself, a belief you have about yourself, about people around the world, it could be about the world in general. What's a core belief that shaped who you become?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the core belief is we're all human. We all are a product of our circumstances. And just because we come from a place that might be harder or we didn't get to go to the best school, it doesn't mean we're less of a person. And we still have all the capability in the world to succeed. We just have to we have to give mentorship and empowerment and the ability to learn through our own culture, not someone else's.
Love it. What about a habit, ritual, or routine that you can't live without? This could be a daily habit that you execute on every single day from a wellness standpoint or a personal development standpoint, right out to, it could be a tradition that you do with your family or something like that each year.
And so I'll say two. Number one, I'm a huge hot yoga guy. I go all the time. I like
nice.
It needs to be like 105 degrees minimum.
Like hotter the better.
Hotter the better. It has to be insanely hard where I think I'm going to pass out every single day. I think it's really valuable to push yourself physically to a point where you're mentally challenged as well. It makes your whole day so much better. It's like the same thing. I love a cold plunge, like something that just pushes you to a level where, okay, if I can handle this, I can handle all these challenges coming at me today. I can handle dealing with some traumatic situation. I can handle fixing a problem if I can get through this. So I really believe in that. And the other thing is that, I mentioned before, if you're capable, you need to show your kids other parts of the world. You need to show them that other people live in different ways and that it doesn't make them special where they come from. It does make them unique, and to celebrate that, but also to appreciate how lucky they are to have what they have. And the more that I do that with my kids, the more I see the levels of empathy and compassion and appreciation coming. So, that's just the other thing I would really push.
Incredible traits to instill in in our kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we wrap up, there was something that you mentioned a little earlier around hiring the best people
Yes.
that I wanted to circle back on. How do you go about doing that? Because you mentioned trust, right? You aim to trust until they fail, and then it's, maybe it's exiting out from that and it doesn't continue in whatever way or shape, form that is. How do you go about ensuring that you're hiring the best people right from the start? What approach do you have?
Yeah, most of the people we hire, we run across organically. The work we do is so specific that when we have put out open calls or hired people from who may have worked at large organizations, it generally hasn't worked out as well. There's a quality of independence and appreciation for the work. And at the same time, there's a social component, understanding how to interact with other communities and cultures without ever coming across as better than or a tourist. There's this element of cultural understanding that is really, it's a human understanding that you need to work at Playing for Change. And it really comes from, part of it is who you are and how you were raised, and part of it is life experience. But we find people who have already had some level of understanding globally and culturally and have those sensitivities to where they can succeed in any environment. And that skill set, it leads to success in so many other realms. If you're able to be anywhere in the world and be able to relate to the person you're talking to and get by and figure things out and help, it really allows you to succeed in almost any situation. There's so many days where I have to go from, meeting in our program and meeting with kids in the slums in the morning, and I'm at the president's palace in the afternoon having a meeting with them, and there's something so incredible about our team having that knowledge of how to interact in both situations and find success. So I really think, like, the more we open ourselves up to figuring out how to face those fears and know that we're going to be okay in whatever situation we're in, obviously, not putting ourselves directly in danger, but figuring out how to navigate different ways of thinking instead of closing ourselves off to different ways of thinking, which I think is what most of us do these days. It makes you a happier person. It really does. The more you open yourselves up to listening and appreciating the way that others think, even if it's not how you think, it eliminates these walls we put up where we just feel like we're hiding from the rest of the world. And instead, you feel like you're celebrating the rest of the world.
Are we losing sight of that as a society?
I mean, it would be hard to say no based off the state of the world right now. Especially where we are literally putting up walls all the time. It's interesting where even if you take, these places where you consider these enemy countries, if you went to one of those countries, 80% of the population, you would think we're the best people, the best, like, really, if you went in and had a meal with a random person in the countries that we consider our greatest enemies, you would think these are the kindest, most wonderful people. Instead, we're focused on the 20% all the time. Instead of understanding we're all human, these people are just living their lives. They have jobs, they have schools. And yeah, we might have different religious beliefs, but why does that matter? It doesn't, none of us are destined to, none of these religions even are saying, hey, we need to go around and kill people. That's because we have bad leadership and bad circumstances who have told us we need to build these walls. We don't need to build walls. We need to have understanding. We need to show them that we're human like they are. Because that's the problem, is we've bled into this mentality of the people that we used to despise, right? The ones telling us we need to fight, we need to kill these people. When in reality, the vast majority of them are people that you would welcome at your dinner table. We're just choosing to ignore that fact.
It reminds me of I can't remember where I heard this for the first time, but we are much more alike than we are different. It really is the case. It really is the case when you get to know someone and are curious and open to understand. So, dude, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, my pleasure, Cameron. Really exciting to talk to you. And I love what you're doing with the podcast. I think it's really wonderful.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And for those of you listening right now, I mentioned earlier that we'll link to everything that was mentioned in the show notes at cameronatlas.com/podcast. We've got some great new guests coming up, so make sure you hit that follow button, leave a comment, and until next time, go and write the next line in your story. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon here on The Edge of Possible.